We're going to do this page 48, activity 3.3. We're going to continue with the program from yesterday. We already did the even and odd, where we counted the number of even and the odd numbers by going through each box of the array. So we're going to do the same sort of principle with negative and positive numbers. So, determine and display the number of negative and positive numbers. Remember that 0 is not negative and it's not positive either. So if it's equal to 0, we don't want to do anything, you know. If you look at the array, you see there they are. Okay, there is a 0, but that's neither positive or negative. And we're going to go from 1 to 25. So we checked out the array here. Are you with me? And now we're going to go into that button, click, and we're going to go through each box of the array and say if AR numbers, box number K, if that is less than 0. If it's less than 0, we know it's negative, isn't it? Then we'll increment our count neg. See, I've got that variable there. And then we'll do the same if it's greater than 0. We will increment our count pos. So we change your less than sign to greater than. I copied and pasted. And our count pos is there. But of course there's a problem. We can't increment counters unless we've got them somewhere initialized to 0. If they are local variables, then we have to initialize them to 0 in that button click event where they are declared. So I'm busy setting my counters, the count negative and count positive numbers, to 0, because local variables are given random numbers. Before we start counting, we start with 0, don't we? Okay. So there we have it. We have our local variables, set them to 0, and if the number is less than 0 for each array box, then we'll increment a counter for that. If the number is greater than 0, then we'll increment a counter for that. And there we have it. Now, after the for loop is ended, we will have our counters ready to display. Remember, this is done inside the loop, and then outside the loop, then we can display the result, which will be in this rich edit. Already out, dot lines, dot add, negative count equals, and then we'll join that to a #9, and join that to int to string, our count neg. Okay, we'll do a new activity just now. So take note of that rich edit.lines.add statement, and then just copy and paste, guys. Copy and paste to get the next one for the positive count. And all of these are working on that global array called AR numbers right at the top there. It would be a good idea to clear the rich edit before we go and display anything in it. So already out dot clear. There's that done. And I think we're finished. Let's look at our instruction. Next, composite button. So a composite button is a composite number is a number that has 2 or more factors. So it's not a prime number, you know what I mean? For every single number, we've got to count how many factors there are. And if there's 2 or more factors, no, more than 2, sorry. More than 2 factors, then we have a constant number. A prime number, if it has 2 factors only. A prime number has 2 factors, 1 and itself, you know what I mean? So we've got to count how many composite numbers there are in that range of numbers in that array. So double click the composite button. Then we're going to have a variable k. And then we're going to say for k equals 1, 2, how many numbers are there now? 25. You must know how many numbers there are in the array. I'll just get a quick look there at the array. We're going to have a loop inside the loop here. The loop. Because for each number we want to count how many factors there are, you know. So I am going to do the following. I'm going to say R count factor colon integer, make a variable for that. How do I know I want a variable for that? Well, because I've got to count the factors for every single number, and there are 25 of them, and this loop is going to sort out going from one to the other. In AR numbers, box number K is going to be our number, isn't it? Our number will be AR numbers, box number K, each time. And we're going to loop from 1 to that number to count how many factors there are. So I'm going to make another variable here called, I'll call it L, I suppose. And then say for L, colon equals 1, 2, AR numbers, box number K, do begin and end. Now this is an L, not an R, L. And then we're going to, you can use another for loop counter if you want. Now we're going to do our mod story. And this is going to be scary because we're going to use AR numbers, box number K each time. And that's going to go, K is going to go from 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. We're going to ask a question. If AR numbers, box number K, mod L equals 0, then we're going to increment our count factors. Should be factors, not factor. Eh? I think it's better with factors. So, but the problem is, our count factors is a global variable, a global integer, which we need to set to 0 before we start incrementing, don't you think? So before we start our for loop, in other words, right here, just above the for loop, I'm going to set our count factors colon equal 0. Now, this is the mistake that people will make. You will put our count factors equal to 0 on the top of the for loop, the outer for loop, you know, like here in this place. But that's not a good, that's not right. We want to count the factors for every different number. And there are 25 of them. So we're going to count our count factors. We're going to work out what our count factors is for one number. And then we're going to work what our count factors is for another number. So in between, we have to keep initializing our count factors to 0. So I hope you understand why this our count factors is set to 0 just before the for loop. This is the inside for loop and not before the outside for loop. If you put it on the outside for loop, then we're going to have a very large R count factors number, whereas we want to add up how many factors there are for each number. And only once we've added up the R count factors, then we can ask the question, this for loop is counting how many factors there are in AR numbers K. That for loop is counting how many factors are in AR numbers K. Box number 1, then 2, then 3. So after this for loop is finished, we'll have how many factors there are. And then we can ask the question, if our count factors is greater than 2, then we're going to increment another count, increment I count composite or whatever, I composite I num composite, whatever variable you want to use. Now I like to do this, I will use variables without declaring them. Doesn't really matter to me. I will write them out and then I think, okay, now I can go and declare that variable because that works. So I think that works. So I'm going to go and declare that variable as an integer. But there's another thing. All these integers in this program have to be set to 0 before we start counting with them. Where are we going to increment our num composite? This is where we're going to increment it right before all the we're going to initialize it before all the for loops happen. We're initializing that counter for the composite numbers before we go through every box of the array. Think of it this way: the outside loop is going through every box of the AR numbers. The inside loop is going through every digit of one of the boxes, from 1 to the actual number itself. We're trying to see if it's a factor, and then we'll increment our count factors if it is. And then after we've counted the number of factors in this inside for loop, we'll ask, well, is our count factors greater than 2? If it is, then we'll increment our num composite. This is a very good example to help you learn about using nested for loops and the counters involved in this activity. Of course, now we can go and display in the rich edit the number of constant lines dot add composite count equals plus int to string on composite. Right, so we're going to move to the next activity just now.